Well, Dana's also a boy's name. Hi. Apologize for that. You've walked into a private conversation between me and my GoXLR. It's been a partner from mine for about 11 months. It's my go-to audio interface, and it's been a good ride. But I've been thinking lately, there's a lot of suitors jumping onto old TechTyndr, trying to get my attention. So I thought, I'm going to pull this little ball and chain out. We're going to take a look under the hood and make sure that this relationship, well, let's see if we're in sync, because I don't want to hang around in a stalled tech relationship just with the kids. You ever notice there's always a Derek? Step through it, join me in the video anyway, and I'll give you a little insight into what the GoXLR is, what attracted me to it in the first place, and at the end of the video, I'll let you know my thoughts on moving forward with it as my go-to audio interface. So with all that, let's get curious about the GoXLR. Let's start with the basics. The GoXLR Mini is 1.5 pounds. It is 6.6 inches in depth and is 5.5 inches wide. Now, knowing that the original GoXLR was 11 inches, that's evidence that the Mini is half the size. It's also evidence that my hands are oddly tiny. Let's move on. Now, at the heart of this little unit is a Midas preamp. That's a quality preamp. It's low noise. It can put out to 72 decibels of gain, which is more than enough to handle power-hungry dynamic mics like the Shure SM7B or an RE20. And what I like about that is those mics can squash out keyboard taps and mice clicks, and the occasional roommate telling you to pick up your clothes. Of course, also with this preamp is 48 volts of phantom power, so those sweet condenser mics are also now at your fingertips. Get it on, gamer gods. So up next is a feature that really excites me about the GoXLR, and that, of course, is the 4 long throw faders. These faders are smooth, they are precise, but what I really like about them is they give me that fingertip control over my audio sources. Each track has a mute button, there's a censorship button for some of you, and a cough button for the overall unit. But in the end, these faders, they give you control over your audio sources, so you no longer have to tab out. So we've talked about the cool faders and the sweet little mute buttons so far. So next up, let's talk about how the audio gets in and out of this little bad guy. Let's start on the inputs on the front. The GoXLR has 2 inputs on the front. One's going to be for a microphone option, and one is for your headphones. Now, the unit is designed primarily for an XLR mic input, which of course is on the back. But if you need an alternative option like a lav mic, this is where we're going to go with it. This is where your monitor feed is going to come out from. And for a second, we need to talk about the headphone amp. So let's talk about the headphone preamp. The headphone preamp has been touted as being able to handle a 250 ohm headphone. So if you own the Beyerdynamic DT990 Pros, well, congratulations. They're going to work. That's the good news. The bad news is your mileage may vary depending on your mic type, what you have the gain set at, and whether or not your ears have become numb after years of drumming. The GoXLR has 5 inputs on the back side. You have the optical, which you would use for gaming consoles like PlayStation and Xbox, USB input, which you of course use for interfacing with the PC and the app, an XLR input, a line input that you would use for an external sound source through a phone or a tablet, for example, and then a line out. Now that line out can go to your speakers, but it's more than that. Prior to products like the GoXLR, setting up audio routing for 2 PCs was a little complex, and it wasn't really straightforward. So you ended up in dark corners of the interweb bumping into people you don't know who would shove a diagram at you and say, hey, here's your answer. And it often was not very helpful. And it often looked like your 8-year-old cousin Skippy drew it with crayons. And along came the GoXLR and their line out for audio here. And this line out sends the complete broadcast mix that you've configured and developed in PCA through the software and puts it out to your streaming PC number 2, and that can be sent out then to whatever platform you're sending your stream to. We're going to move on to the brain and the nervous system, which is the app and the audio routing. So let's cue screen share. First thing you'll notice when you open up the GoXLR is what they call the live view of the GoXLR. And anything that you do on this version will show up in the software version. You can see the colors, the the meters all look the same. If I engage any of the mute buttons, it all shows up in sync. If we click on this teal blue profile, you'll see that the colors and the volume levels on both the software and the physical version of the GoXLR immediately are in sync. They've changed colors, the volume levels are all the same. That's great, that's how it should be. If you move down and start tweaking volume levels to the software, you're also going to see that in real time, they give you the feedback you want. One thing you're probably noticing, the fader on the physical version is not in sync with what's happening on the software version. Well, again, these faders are not motorized, so they're not intended to move with the software. But to catch it back up on the physical level, you're just going to fly up the fader, back down, and then you'll catch that meter. And now you're back in control on the physical version, and everything's back in sync on this level. Now we get to pull up the hood a little bit and check out the features and power of this application. So I'm going to speed run this really quick. I'll do a video another time of my settings for live streaming and recording. So let's get on with it here. In the mic tab, we have a mic setup where you would choose mic types, for example, dynamic, condenser, and you set your gain. So this is a mic setup. In the same area, you have 3 audio processing options here. You have gate, equalizer, and compressor. And in the summary form here, when they're collapsed, they have some basic options you can use. And if you expand them, they have a lot more fine tuning tools that you can use to get yourself up and running and sound pretty good. And keep in mind again that the actual work of the processors are done on the GoXLR itself, not on your computer. So it's not going to bog down your CPU. The mixer. All right, so the mixer is going to allow us to assign our audio sources to our 4 channels that we desire. You can also set up some mute options for each channel, and you can have some actions that you want to choose there. The mixer is just a software version of some faders that allow you to set all the audio cables, virtual and hard lines, to a certain level that you desire. Control bleeps, and you have a little bit of a headphone submix over here that you can play with. The cough button, there's some behaviors here you can choose, and of course, more mute options that you have available. The lighting, which is the visual bling of the unit. There is so much you could really do in here, and it is fun to play. I'm not going to go deep into the styles, but let me just tell you that each channel can have its own color scheme if you want. You can, let's do a couple here real quick just to give you an idea. So you can have your own color schemes there if you want. If you want though, you can just go ahead and hit apply all and do a quick color scheme to everything at once. You can cut to the chase. The mute buttons can all be color schemed individually as well, but if you want to do them all at once, you can do the same thing. I'll just do those real quick and I'll show you that. The cough and bleep button, the 2 buttons at the bottom, you can do the same thing, set up the colors how you want. There is a global or accents option as well. Not a whole lot really here at the moment. If you want to change that X at the top in the title, you can do that. So there you go. The routing tab, well, that's where everything sort of meets up into the nerve center here. And what's funny is that table here looks so simple. And yet there's just so much power and flexibility behind it. I really can appreciate it. So all of our input sources exist here that we've been managing, and we have output sources over here in this grid. And what we're going to do is just use checkboxes to assign where we want those inputs to end up. I'll just do an example. So let's say you're a gamer live streaming and you have Discord. You are not going to probably want your chat to go out to Twitch, so you can pull that out by just doing that. Or maybe you have music that you want your stream to hear, but as you're playing your game or on task, you don't want to actually have it in your headset. You can just pull that out. Your system, your bells and whistles and little things that go off, more than likely you're not going to want that going to chat, so you can take that out. And you can choose certain samples. I mean, you can go on and on. It's really however you want to design your workflow or develop your needs. It's right here. Okay, so we got a glimpse into what the GoXLR is and all the features and power that it presents in such a small, compact little unit. And the size itself is actually quite an achievement when you think about all the audio components, it's squeezing down into this form factor. Prior to units like the GoXLR, the audio chain for audio recording was a little bit more complex. You'd have a mic, of course, you'd have an audio interface, maybe a digital signal processor. You might have to add something like a cloud lifter or FET head to boost the mic signal. And then you're into the PC and you think, oh, I'm done, I'm good. But you're not, because you still have the issue of complex audio routing. And so you might have to go out and get something like Voicemeeter and bolt that onto the process. And while it's a great product, it comes with its own headaches and issues. So what the GoXLR is doing in something so small is actually quite impressive. So the GoXLR is impressive, but is it perfect? Well, as I said earlier, it is not. And neither is the neck on this t-shirt that is stretching out every minute I shoot this video. Let's talk about the physical attributes first of the unit. Now for me, I have no qualms about the physical side of the GoXLR. I like the size, it's built well, it's got some heft to it. The faders have held up very well. They're very smooth. They've never gotten loose over time, which I'm actually quite surprised with. The mute buttons feel satisfactory. They've held up, as have the audio inputs and outputs. On the bottom are 4 rubberized feet that hold this unit in place very well, even on a very, very slick desk like this one. It's kind of important, but if I have one thing to say, and I just want to stop for 1 second, and I want to send a strongly worded message to the engineer who was responsible for the USB port on the backside of the unit. And I want to ask why. Why could you not allow for a 1/4 inch more clearance so the cable could recess all the way inside the unit? It dangles halfway out. It's completely ridiculous. And if you have any OCD tendencies, this is going to trigger you. Now, it's not a deal breaker. I've not run into any issues, but I do have a little concern that if you move this unit around a little bit too much and wiggle it, it could damage that port. But man, who damaged you as a baby? Okay, with all that, should anyone have any concerns moving forward with the GoXLR? I personally don't really think so. I know there were some members of the community who were a bit unnerved when the original members or some original members of the dev team left the project. I don't know why. That happens all the time. That's not something that truly concerns me. TC Helicon's been in this audio game for a long time. They have a lot invested. I don't think there's any concern that they're going to just up and abandon this project. There were a lot in the community who were clamoring for a GoXLR 2 for quite a while. I don't know what they're looking for in a GoXLR 2, but even TC Helicon at one point put GoXLR 2 in their feature list on their board until they didn't and removed it. And that didn't help any of the concerns or calm the nerves of a lot of people. So I don't know. I don't think there's any issue with TC Helicon moving forward. I think people are nervous. Right now, it seems that they're beta testing additional submixing for audio for the unit. So I think that'll be a great augmentation when that gets released. So the natural question then with all this is, what am I going to do moving forward? Am I going to continue using the GoXLR as my go-to audio interface from here? And the simple answer is yes. However, as I said earlier, I've saved some very interesting profiles on my TechTyndr, so I wouldn't get too comfortable. If you found any of this information insightful or helpful, please drop a like. But either way, I'll see you in the next video intro.